On the morning of June 12, 1962, at 7 a.m., guard James Hendrickson conducts a roll call at Alcatraz Island Prison, also known as the Rock. He has many tasks ahead, so he tries to do this as quickly as possible. But 3 inmates don't respond. James then goes to one of their cells and sees that the prisoner is still lying in his bed. He taps the pillow with his baton, trying to wake up the inmate. But at that moment, the person's head falls to the floor. This is how the story of the greatest escape in world history begins. 3 prisoners had vanished from their cells, leaving behind 3 realistic papier-mâché heads. But how did they manage to escape from a prison that was supposed to be inescapable? And most importantly, where did the escapees go? And where are they now? Today, we'll try to answer one of the biggest mysteries of the 20th century. On an early January morning in 1960, Frank Morris arrives at Alcatraz Island Prison. Since the age of 13, he has been in and out of prisons, mainly for robberies. He is a career criminal with extensive escape experience and a very high IQ. Some call him the Houdini of the prison system, as he has successfully escaped 11 times from other places of confinement. His most recent escapes were from a prison in Louisiana and the federal prison in Atlanta. That's why he's placed in Alcatraz, a prison from which escape is deemed impossible. It housed the most dangerous criminals, including Al Capone. Alcatraz gained a reputation as one of the harshest and most secure prisons in the world, thanks to its isolated island location, harsh living conditions, and strict security measures. It is the world's most guarded prison, surrounded by the cold and turbulent waters of San Francisco Bay. 14 escape attempts from it have ended in failure for the inmates. To Morris's left, in the adjacent cell, arrives Alan West, who also has considerable escape experience. A few months later, brothers John and Clarence Anglin become his neighbors to the right. They were sent to Alcatraz because they had tried to escape from Leavenworth Prison. Before arriving on the island, they were known for their swimming abilities. The brothers enjoyed swimming in the cold waters of Lake Michigan when ice was still floating on the surface. All this time, Morris is hatching a plan. He realizes that a good team for escaping the impregnable prison has formed around him. He proposes to Alan and the Anglin brothers to escape together. But to do this, they need to solve 4 problems: how to get out of the cell, how to leave the prison building, how to descend to the water unnoticed, and how to reach the mainland. It all starts with a ventilation shaft through which they can access the prison roof. West tells Morris about it. There were 8 of them in the prison ceiling, but only 1 wasn't cemented. If they could get into the utility room behind the cell wall, they could reach the ventilation shaft. But how to do this? The thing is, the cell had one peculiarity. Right under the sink was a ventilation opening. Due to the salt water, the concrete became soft and deteriorated. All 4 began to make a hole around the ventilation grills, using spoons stolen from the dining hall. They work at night, guarding each other and figuring out how to conceal their work. Morris, having artistic talent, creates a papier-mâché model of the ventilation opening and paints it as cover. From the corridor, it's almost impossible to distinguish from the real one. It takes them almost 5 months to leave the cell. After getting into the utility room behind the cell wall, all 4 face the first problem. The ventilation shaft is tightly closed with a cover screwed with bolts. These bolts need to be sawed off. To convince the guards that they are still in their cells, the escapees invent fake heads for their prison beds. They make the heads from whatever they can get their hands on, paper, soap, and cement. As a final touch, Clarence Anglin takes real human hair from the barber shop and glues it to the tops of the heads. Meanwhile, Alan West volunteers to fix a broken vacuum cleaner in the prison. To his great surprise and joy, he discovers that inside are not one, but two motors. West fixes one and removes the other. He attaches drills to this motor, making a good tool to saw off the bolts on the ventilation cover. But what to do about the noise it makes during operation? A long-standing tradition in Alcatraz helps with this. Inmates were given time to play musical instruments, and this is a perfect cover to hide the noise. Every day during the happy hour, the four of them saw off the bolts on the ventilation shaft cover while the dummies of their heads lie in the beds. But getting out of the building is only half the plan. They also need to find a way to reach the shore. And surprisingly, the weather helps with this. The weather in San Francisco is characterized by a lot of heavy rain. Therefore, raincoats in Alcatraz were an integral part of the inmates' wardrobe. And the administration doesn't keep strict account of this material. Morris finds an article in Popular Mechanics magazine about how to make a boat from waterproof coats. To make it, the escapees managed to get 55 waterproof dark blue coats from other inmates by trading. They invent waterproof glue and carefully vulcanize the seams on the homemade boat. They make paddles from wooden scraps and plywood found in the prison. 9 months of persistent preparation have come to their logical conclusion, and all four are ready to do something that no one has managed before. So Morris announces the escape date. It will happen on June 11th. But before we continue, I have a favor to ask of you. I make videos myself, and it's quite a labor-consuming and expensive process. So your best gratitude would be a like and a subscription. Thank you. On June 11, 1962, at 10 p.m., the lights go out in Alcatraz. Morris and his accomplices have only 9 hours to carry out the escape. Frank Morris, Alan West, and the brothers John and Clarence Anglin place dummies in their beds, covering them with blankets and putting fake heads on their pillows. After this, they crawl through a hole in the wall and seal it from the inside with bricks. They have life jackets, a boat, paddles, and a concertina with them. But not everything goes according to plan. West has a problem. He overdid it when cementing the fake plug on the wall, and because of this, he can't remove it and thus can't get out of the cell. Clarence tries to break through the hole from behind the wall using a pipe provided by Morris, but it makes too much noise. Then Morris suggests moving on and waiting for Alan on the roof. The three of them make their way up to the ventilation opening, push out the pre-sawed ventilation grate, which falls onto the roof with a clatter. An officer in the western gun galley hears the noise. He reports the noise to the lieutenant on duty, who goes to investigate inside the prison, but finds nothing. The escapees, fearing that the guards might come running at the noise, move on. In their haste, they lose one of the paddles and leave behind a spare life jacket and raft. The prisoners descend via the exterior pipe on the kitchen wall. They manage to reach the barbed wire fence unnoticed. They throw clothes over it and safely climb on to the other side. Then they descend to the water on the northwest part of the island. Using the concertina, they inflate the boat in life jackets. Morris gives the command to set sail. At 11 p.m., the trio launches their homemade boat into the treacherous waters of San Francisco Bay. At this time, West continued to dig furiously in the depths of his cell. Finally, after several hours, he managed to get out, and upon reaching the roof, he found it empty. West stood for a few moments, then descended back into the shaft, crawled into his cell, and lay in his bed. He still couldn't believe that Morris had sailed without him. The next morning, upon discovering that the prisoners had disappeared, the FBI begins the search. They involve the Coast Guard and all the police stations nearby on the mainland. The main evidence includes the prisoners' cells, their improvised workshop under the ceiling, and the primary source of information, Alan West. He's already identified as the fourth escapee. In his cell, they find a papier-mâché head and a fake mold on his ventilation grill. West quite willingly talks about the planned escape route. Instead of swimming 1 mile south to San Francisco, the escapees planned to head 2 miles north to the sparsely populated Angel Island. From there, the plan was to steal a car and escape to the mainland. A few days later, combing the waters around Angel Island, investigators find important evidence that matches West's testimony. They discover a bundle made of rubber coats containing photographs of the Anglin family members. A homemade wooden paddle is also found near Angel Island. It matches another paddle found on the roof. Also, after 3 days, a life jacket is found on a beach at a considerable distance from Alcatraz. It matches the life jacket left behind by Alan West, but the escapees themselves or their bodies are not found. Police set up surveillance on all relatives. This will continue for almost 20 years. On December 31, 1979, more than 17 years later after the escape, the FBI officially closes the case. The FBI's version is that the prisoners drowned and couldn't reach land. According to this version, they were carried away by a strong current towards the ocean. They then abandoned the boat and tried to swim to shore. However, they couldn't cope with the hypothermia and drowned. This version is supported by the found bundle and paddle. However, no bodies were found, so the case is transferred to the U.S. Marshals in case the prisoners are alive. But did Frank Morris, the Houdini among prisoners, really fail to conquer the impregnable prison and drown along with the Anglin brothers? The case remains dormant until 2003. In 2003, Marshal Mike Dyke decides to carefully examine the documents once again. What he finds shocks him. In government documents, he finds records that the homemade boat was found on the beach of Angel Island. Michael Dyke turns to Marin County police records and discovers that there is a report of a stolen car, a blue 1955 Chevrolet, that was stolen on the night of the men's escape. Just a few hours after the car theft report, a man in Stockton says he was forced off the road by a blue Chevrolet, driven by 3 men. If these pieces of evidence are to be believed, then Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers could have well survived the cool waters, and the plan of the most daring escape in history could have well succeeded. Less than a year after the escape, in 1963, Alcatraz prison was closed. There are many theories and versions about where the escapees might be, ranging of a photograph of the Anglin brothers in Brazil to a letter allegedly written by John Anglin to the FBI in 2013. All these versions have a right to exist, but one thing is certain: the U.S. Marshal Service is still continuing the search for the prisoners and will do so until the term expires in 2030. Thank you for watching. Peace to you.